Meet Jake. Jake is 29, works a decent job, and just checked his bank account in the parking lot of a shoe store. $412. Rent is due in 6 days and costs $900. He walks inside anyway, and 20 minutes later walks out with a new pair of sneakers in a glossy bag. This isn't a story about Jake being careless. Versions of this exact moment play out in cities everywhere, every single day, for people who otherwise seem completely responsible. So what's actually pulling the trigger on a purchase like this? It's not the sneakers. It's something running quietly underneath them. We're going to call this pattern the appearance trap, a cycle where someone spends money not to enjoy something, but to avoid looking like they can't afford it. It's simple to define, but surprisingly hard to notice happening in real time, because it never feels like a trap from the inside. Jake's coworker Marcus earns the exact same salary. Marcus drives a 10-year-old Honda and splits rent with a roommate. Jake leases a shiny SUV and lives alone in a building he can barely afford. Same paycheck, completely different financial reality. And Jake would tell you Marcus is the one missing out. Jake isn't lying to anyone on purpose. He genuinely believes the SUV and the apartment are just what a successful person his age is supposed to have. That belief didn't arrive with a receipt. It built up slowly from every ad, every group chat, every scroll through a friend's vacation photos. Here's the first force driving this. Humans read status the way animals read body language, instantly and mostly without thinking. Clothes, cars, phones, they're a silent language everyone speaks, whether they mean to or not, and Jake feels pressure to sound fluent in it, even on a budget that can't afford the vocabulary. Social media cranks this up to a volume nobody's brain evolved to handle. Jake scrolls past a friend's beach trip, a coworker's new watch, a stranger's remodeled kitchen, 20 comparisons before breakfast, each one quietly whispering that he's falling behind, even when nothing in his actual life has changed. The second force is comparison itself. Feeling short of something not because you're missing it, but because the person next to you seems to have it. Jake's $400 felt fine yesterday. Today, standing next to Marcus's calm confidence, it suddenly feels like failure. Nothing about the number changed, only the mirror changed. The third force is deeper and harder to admit. For Jake, being broke doesn't feel like a temporary situation. It feels like a verdict on who he is. So he spends to protect an identity, buying proof, even just for himself, that he hasn't fallen as far as his bank balance suggests. This is why Jake can smile confidently at brunch while quietly dodging his banking app for days. Admitting the struggle feels like admitting he's failing at being an adult. So instead, the struggle stays hidden and the spending keeps the mask glued on just a little longer. The fourth force is something behavioral economists call the pain of paying. The discomfort your brain feels the instant money visibly leaves your hand. Swiping a card barely registers that pain. It delays it, disconnects it, and by the time the bill lands, the joy of the sneakers is long gone. Only the debt remains. Jake doesn't consciously choose to ignore consequences. His brain simply never fully processed them in real time. The purchase felt free in the moment it happened, and that illusion of free is exactly what keeps this cycle running for millions of people who genuinely aren't trying to sabotage themselves. The fifth and final force we'll call the middle-class mirage, the unspoken belief that certain purchases aren't optional but required, just to be taken seriously as a functioning adult. A specific car, a certain zip code, the right logo on the right jacket. Nobody hands out this rulebook, nobody signs it, but advertising, comparison, and culture write it anyway. And Jake, like millions of others, has spent years quietly trying to meet standards he never actually agreed to, chasing a checklist that was never really his in the first place. Here's why this matters more than it looks. Every dollar spent maintaining the mirage is a dollar that never builds an emergency fund, never pays down debt, never grows into real security. The image gets funded generously. The foundation underneath stays completely empty. Jake looks financially fine from the outside. The SUV, the apartment, the sneakers all say doing great. But he's one flat tire, one medical bill, one bad week away from real trouble. A mirage that holds up beautifully right until the moment it doesn't. So what actually breaks this cycle? Not shame and not another budgeting app. This is an identity problem wearing a financial disguise, which means the fix has to work on both fronts at once, starting with a single honest question asked at the exact moment it matters most. Step 1. Before any appearance-driven purchase, Jake starts asking, am I buying this because I genuinely want it, or because I'm scared of how I'll look without it? He doesn't always like the honest answer, but asking the question out loud changes the outcome almost every time. Step 2. Jake writes down privately what financial stability actually means to him, not what it's supposed to look like to Marcus, his coworkers, or his family group chat. Just his own definition on his own terms, locked away from outside comparison entirely. The moment success gets defined privately, spending naturally starts following that private definition instead of a borrowed one. The crowd's opinion quietly loses its grip, because it was never really part of the definition Jake actually wrote down for himself. Step 3. Jake picks something visible to actually be proud of that isn't spending. A savings number climbing on a screen, a credit card balance finally hitting zero. Progress he can watch grow without needing a single person to see it or approve of it. Step 4. Jake still buys things he loves. He just decides in advance which purchases are genuinely worth it, instead of reacting in the moment to comparison. A planned splurge and an anxious splurge can look identical on a receipt. They come from completely different places inside him. 6 months later, Jake still drives a normal car. He still lives in a modest apartment, but for the first time, he has an emergency fund that actually covers an emergency. And the strange thing is, he stopped caring whether Marcus or anyone else ever notices. None of this required Jake to earn more money first. That's the part almost nobody expects. The real gap was never between his income and his bills. It was between what he earned and what he felt pressured to display. And that gap can shrink at any income level, starting today. The financially healthiest people you know probably aren't the highest earners in the room. They're usually the ones who quietly stopped funding an image and started funding an actual foundation, even when that foundation looks far less impressive from the outside than the mirage ever did. This shift isn't always comfortable. Stepping back from spending everyone around you is still doing can feel isolating at first, even a little embarrassing. But that discomfort fades far faster than financial stress ever does, once the foundation actually starts holding weight. It helps to remember something else too. Marcus isn't the only one running his own race quietly. Plenty of people performing confidence in public are dodging their own banking app in private, just like Jake used to. The mirage runs in more directions than anyone admits out loud. Once that becomes visible, the whole comparison game loses its grip. It's hard to keep chasing someone else's appearance the moment you realize that appearance might be balanced on the exact same shaky foundation as everyone else's, just better lit and better filtered. So the real question isn't how to earn enough to finally look successful. It's whether looking successful was ever the actual goal, or just the easiest thing to measure from the outside, while the thing that mattered was happening quietly, somewhere nobody else was watching. Financial security rarely announces itself the way spending does. Nobody posts a photo of a fully funded emergency account. That kind of progress is quiet by nature, which is exactly why it keeps losing the attention war against things that are loud, shiny, and easy to photograph. Choosing the quiet kind of progress takes a specific kind of courage. Being okay looking, at least for now, less impressive than people who are actually far less financially stable underneath their polished surface. That trade is almost always worth making. That kind of quiet courage compounds in ways spending never can. A savings account grows steadily in the background, while a designer jacket loses value the second it leaves the store. One of these builds real freedom. The other only rents the appearance of it, one payment at a time. None of this means nice things are wrong, or that anyone should feel guilty for a purchase they genuinely enjoy. It means learning to tell the difference between spending that comes from real joy and spending that comes from quietly trying to outrun a feeling of not being enough. Once that difference gets clear, spending stops being automatic and starts being intentional. The goal was never to spend less out of fear of judgment. The goal is to spend on purpose, guided by an internal compass instead of an audience that, honestly, was never watching quite as closely as it felt. The people who eventually build lasting stability usually aren't the ones who never felt the pull toward appearance spending. Jake still feels it sometimes, even now. They're the ones who noticed the pull, understood exactly where it came from, and chose a different response. One decision at a time. If any part of Jake's story felt uncomfortably familiar, that discomfort isn't something to be ashamed of. It's just information, a signal pointing exactly toward where change could start. Noticing the pattern already puts you in a completely different position than being unknowingly stuck inside it. Looking rich costs money every single day, on repeat, forever. Being financially secure costs discipline for a while, and then it starts quietly paying you back for the rest of your life, long after everyone who was watching has stopped paying attention. This choice doesn't get made once, in one dramatic moment. It gets made in small decisions, over and over. A swipe declined here, a private goal written down there, until one day the whole pattern quietly looks different than it used to. Jake still hasn't told Marcus about the emergency fund. He doesn't need to. The version of success he was chasing for years turned out to be quieter, steadier, and far less expensive than the one he thought he was supposed to have. And it finally feels like it actually belongs to him. If this pattern felt familiar, you're not broken, and you're definitely not alone. This is exactly the kind of thing we break down every week here on Levels Nobody Sees. Hit subscribe and let's keep building the kind of wealth nobody has to see to know it's real.